Brad, I want to talk to you about plumbing. Do you have a minute? Brad, do you have a minute for this?
Plumbing in general or personal plumbing?
Well, I guess a little bit of both. So I'm in London over Christmas break, and it was lovely, and the people were lovely, and the city was lovely, and the whole visit was lovely. But they have a specific kind of sink in England that it's still there. It was there when I lived there 20 years ago, and it's still there. And it drives me bonkers that a modern society hasn't figured this out yet. It's a sink, Brad. Imagine you're facing a sink, and there is a single spigot. There's not a single spigot of water. It's two spigots of water with two individual valves, one for hot, one for cold.
Right.
So when you're washing your hands, you have the option of either scaldingly hot, tear your flesh off water, or freezingly ice cold London water, that's at room temperature, which is -40.
Right out of the Thames.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't understand how a modern society hasn't figured out that an extra $1.50 of plumbing underneath the sink, you connect those two lines, you have the valves join up before the spigot, it all comes out one, and then you can have medium heat, Brad, medium heat water.
Wouldn't it be nice to have warm water for a change?
I ask this to you as a friend because I love the English. Why have they not figured this out yet? Why is this so flummoxing in 2024, Brad, that this basic plumbing thing could not be fixed?
We went to London the year before, right around the same time of the year, and I had the same reaction at the size of their electrical outlets. These huge, the size of a brick, right? If you've got to plug anything in, these huge, thick, pencil-thick tongs that's got to go into the wall. We were carrying adapters around every place we went, for all of our American appliances. And I had the same exact, I don't remember getting upset at the plumbing, but the electricity drove me around the bend.
Well, our listeners can correct me, but I think that English electrical on the plug level, I agree with you that they're gigantic. Like for American standards, they look and they feel like you're carrying a small gerbil in your hand in terms of size of the plug. Like it's huge. But am I incorrect in thinking that the English actually have safer plugs than the U.S. because they have the switch at the plug, which is always safe? And there's something about it's better grounded. I do know this, that English electrical, because of the voltage I think that they use, their electrical tea kettles warm up water like instantly compared to American tea kettles. And I got to tell you, if you're a country that loves tea, that's like of maximum importance. They're like, we are not switching this electrical system for anything. We want tea within 10 seconds. Get it to me quick.
Right. I need it right now, and I don't care. And if I've got to, see, that's the thing. See, if you've got a slower teapot, you've got time to think about the spigots in the sink.
Right.
And as long as you've got fast tea, there's no time to thinking about that stuff. You're off to your next thing. So I think it's all connected.
I don't have time to fix this plumbing. I've got a delicious warm cup of tea right now.
Yes.
Who has time to go down to the hardware store and combine two pipes together before it reaches the spigot? And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of the comics documentary Stripped.
And this week's hour of international comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. First of all, can I just say, it has been, for the most part, about 2 or 3 weeks since I last spoke to Brad, and I am so excited to podcast with you. I didn't realize how much I missed it. It's to the sense that I could record for 3 or 4 hours with you today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And we just might, too. It's so funny. Just the difference between different people's relationships. While you guys were gone over to London, every now and again, my wife would say, so what are the Kelletts doing in London? Where are they going to visit? What do they have planned? When do they leave? When do they get back? And I'd say, I don't know.
It's such a guy. Glow asked me stuff about what's going on with your life, and I'm like, I don't know what he's doing. And she's like, you talk to him like 5 times a day. What?
Yeah,
I don't know. Typical guy communication skills. Like, I have no idea what's going on with Brad. It's like, she's always like, how are his kids? I don't know. I think they're fine. I'm assuming they're fine.
Doing just fine. I haven't heard about anybody falling off a cliff or anything. She's like, well, are they going to go to see the Tower of London? Are they going to go to see this? Or did you tell them about your trip and some places that you might suggest? And I go, no.
Oh my God.
And she goes, when do they come back? I said, I don't know. I'll get a call. It's none of my business when they get back. And she says, men are so strange. She says, if this would have been one of my friends, I would have known their entire itinerary. I'd know when their plane lands. I'd know everything, where they're eating lunch today. I'd know. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm sure they're going to have lunch. They don't need me to tell him to have lunch.
Dave's a grown man. He'll figure it out.
He's gotten this far.
He'll burn his hands on one side of the sink and then freeze it on the other side of the sink. He's a grown man. He knows how England works. No, we had a great time. But it's funny that sort of male communication pattern. My wife had this line in one of the plays that she wrote, and it came out of a real life event where we got off of a dinner party and we're in the car driving home. And I was like, so did you have good conversations? She's like, yeah, it turns out that Greg and Susan are having problems in their marriage. And then Margaret, she's really having trouble at work. And she's like, what did you guys talk about? I was like, mostly Star Wars. Bloke goes, we were there for 4 hours. And I was like, well, to be fair, there's 9 movies. I mean, what do you want from me? There's a lot to talk about. But anyway, so yes, I tremendously miss talking to you. And so I want people to know, as they listen to this podcast, it is genuine, the friendship that Brad and I have in talking about the art of comics, because so many times over the course of the flight and on the trips and being on the tube or doing this or that, I would jot down mentally ideas that I wanted to talk to you about in the world of comics. But we have a huge show for everybody today. And Brad has a really big topic that I'm excited to hear about, because it impacts all of us going into 2024. Yeah.
Well, so here's what I want to talk about today. And it's a little bit of an outgrowth or a tangent from the earlier show where we talked about our goals. One of the things that I did while taking a little bit of time off over the holidays was really take a long, hard, objective look at what's working and what's not working in my outreach.
Right.
Specifically, a topic that we've talked about on the show for an awful long time. Twitter has always been my strongest platform, and it is undeniable that Twitter's the deadened engagement on Twitter has affected my business to a significant extent. I can see it in my Patreon numbers going down. And I said in an earlier show, one of the ways I got my Patreon to turn around was using largely non-social media methods. So I started taking an objective look at what's working and what's not working. And I've got a lot of stuff to talk about as a result of that.
Well, and I want to hear all of that. I want to clarify one thing, because I think this is important for people to understand who might be newish to social media, which is when you say Twitter was your best performing platform, do you mean that had the most followers, or do you mean that you were able to translate someone's activity with you on Twitter into going to Kickstarter or going to Patreon? Or
that's an important question. In my particular case, it was both. Right.
Okay.
There was no competition from any of the other platforms in terms of raw numbers, but in terms of engagement and being able to actually reach people and direct traffic and all that kind of stuff. There was nothing else I was doing that was as powerful. But the two don't always go hand in hand.
No, they don't.
And you're right to point that out.
Right.
Because sometimes you can have fewer followers. And we've said it before in the show, we don't measure an audience by the number of people. We measure them by the amount of passion. Right. So I'll always take a smaller but more passionate social media group than I will anything else. But in this particular case, it was both. It was both my highest number of followers and the best engagement.
So you're taking a look at what was working and what was not working. What did you sort of come across as you sat over the Christmas break to think about it?
Well, I came up with, I've got here in my planner, and I've got a new, you'll see, hardcover
he's holding it
planner.
Up, ladies and gentlemen. It's gorgeous.
That's right. Oh, it is really, and I got this at Target. It's an absolute delight. And I always preach against fetishizing. I had to go back and get the exact same one because I never did as well planning as I did last year. And I think part of that also wasn't the hardcover. It was just I never had to concentrate as much as I did this year. But I went out, I had to get the exact same thing because it works so well.
It's not fetishizing if it works. I have a very specific wall calendar that I buy every year because it works. Yeah. It does exactly what I needed to do. That's not fetishizing.
Yeah. And why recreate the wheel, right? Yeah. But as you can see in the first page here, I've got a list of 10 things, 10 different objectives that I've decided that I need to either incorporate or do differently or change course on. There's 10 things. I'm not going to talk about them all today because some of them I'm not ready to talk about yet. Some of them are not ready to discuss. Right. And there's a couple things that you and I talked that are for Comic Lab that we'll talk about later. But I've got even that kind of stuff on the list. But there's a lot of stuff for us to talk about, and I'm going to talk about as much as I can today because I think that a lot of the stuff that I'm grappling with is pretty universal, right? I'm seeing a deadened social media. I've been going a lot on the fact that I think that we're not trying to find the next social media. I think we're all trying to find what comes after social media. Right. Like I've said before, I think we as a people are just tired of social media. We're just done with it.
And you know what? Just to emphasize the fact that seems to be in the zeitgeist. Over Christmas break, I read not one but two very long articles about how whole swaths of people seem to be giving up on social media as a way to communicate. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with that. And the first thing that I did was something that if you would have told me I was going to do this a year and a half ago, I would have told you were crazy. But I did it. And again, partially because nothing else is working, right? Partially because at this point, I've got, if I'm going to be launching a couple of Kickstarters this year, I've got to work now to get those lines of communication open. And I'm open to taking chances and doing things that I maybe was too comfortable to do before, if I'm being honest, right? Right. And what I'm talking about, of course, is Substack.
Oh, really?
Something I never thought I would do.
Yeah, you hated it. Well, not hated it.
I did not like. Well, no, I didn't like it. I was not bullish on it for sure. And partially, I kind of poo-pooed this idea that they said, "Oh yeah, we're going to make it social media," and or they're going to bring those aspects in. And it wasn't, honest to goodness, it wasn't until Scott Kurtz, he had experimented with it, and I looked at it, and he says, "Yeah, you got to take a look at this. This is pretty interesting." And I looked at what he was doing, and I looked at how he was posting, how the engagement happened, what happened after he posted. And I'll be damned if they didn't bring social media into the idea of a newsletter. It was something that I was boggled by. And I immediately, when I saw what was happening there, I'm like, okay, I get it now. I get it. So I started a Substack for Evil Inc., which is not pretty much, you can, okay, so Evil Inc. I'm treating kind of like a tip jar, right? You can subscribe, but I don't have any exclusive rewards there yet. Mm-hmm. But it's just basically going to eventually replace my MailChimp mailing list, right? And again, that I got to thank Scott for that too, because I said, I don't know whether I want to do that. I don't know whether I want to start Substack, because then I've got to commit to Substack and abandon MailChimp because I can't do them both. It's going to get confusing. And he says, well, what are you paying for MailChimp? And I'm like, oh my God, that's right.
Yeah.
Just earlier in 2023, they had waltzed me right. I had crossed the threshold at which you need to pay a monthly fee. And I signed up for the monthly fee, but I realized, hey, I can make a pretty smart business move in that MailChimp isn't offering me anything that I can't get at Substack. If anything, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, Substack is offering a lot more than I was getting at MailChimp. So I can not only get rid of a monthly fee, but I can start to generate income through this, because eventually I can start to make those, those exclusive rewards happen and so forth. So Substack very much encourages you, when you first sign up, to port over your MailChimp mailing list, right? And you can do it literally, Dave, with a push of the button. We'll make it easy for you. Just bring over all those emails.
Now, do you have to get sort of an opt-in thing, though, before you do that?
No. Not you. Okay. Do you have to? From Substack
No, of course,
standpoint,
they're happy
no.
to get the additional user base quickly. Yeah.
In terms of my own moral compass, yes. Yes. So I'm putting a note out in the next several iterances of the email that I put out through my newsletter. I'm putting out a message saying, hey, I'm switching over to Substack. It's going to happen in next week. If you want to opt out, this is the time. Otherwise, I'm going to bring you over to the new mailing list. But this is your opportunity to opt out of Substack. Right. Because I don't feel right about just bringing them all over without giving them a notification about that.
No, nor do I. Well, okay, I have a lot of questions about this, mainly because I will admit to everyone that I'm mainly ignorant about Substack, because I glanced at it when it first came out, and then I kind of forgot about it, because they were doing the thing. Am I right, Brad, in remembering this, that they were doing the thing where for 365 days they would offer somebody like $100,000 if you started a Substack.
Yeah,
they basically set aside a few 10 million to entice people onto the platform, because if they brought the big guns. Anyway, so the things that I know about Substack now are, it's kind of newslettery. It's mostly text-based, right?
Yes.
But you can include images. Am I right? And I'm literally coming at this naive. I've never looked at the Substack or how to set it up. What does the average person read Substack on? Is it an app? Do they get it in their email? Where do they find it? Do they go to the website?
So the answer to that is yes, across all. But it goes into a bigger conversation.
Is it kind of RSS-y? Kind of
a little bit, little bit. But it's very much like your current MailChimp email newsletter. In other words, I deliver a vertical scroll in my email newsletter. Right.
Okay.
So I'm just when I put out Evil Inc., I'm just going to do the same thing, put out a scroll that shows up in their email inbox. But going into the deeper topic there, immediately what I started to do when I started looking around here, trying to get my bearings, was who's doing well? Who's a thought leader in this, and who's doing stuff that they have ideas I can emulate. And the first person I saw who was knocking it out of the park is a person that you and I met for the first time just a few months ago, Jason Chatfield from the NCS.
Yeah, Jason. Oh, so Jason does a Substack, does he?
He's doing a lot on Substack. And so I immediately followed him and I started taking a look at what he's posting, how he's posting. And he's a guy like us, right? A visual artist, but he does a lot of prose with his work. He's writing blog, but basically everything old is new again. Right. He's basically writing what you and I would have called a blog post that would have appeared under our comic, right? So he's doing a lot, but I saw him post another one thing. He's been on Substack for a while, and he posted stats from 2023, and he could see that people were basically reading the amount of copy that came across in their email, and they were not clicking across to see the full thing a lot of times.
Oh, really?
So that's kind of good news in that you don't have to write a lot. You don't have to write a book. You're
saying like just put pieces. A paragraph in there and
kind of, yeah. Just keep it short and simple for some of these things. Now there's going to be some long form usages, and I'm going to talk to you about that. Mm-hmm. But like for you and me doing comics, just a little paragraph that says, here's what I think about today's comic could be kind of the way to go because they're not going to click through.
And so I'm just imagining this. For the people that would be reading Evil Link via an emailed Substack, they would get that little paragraph of text. Would they get the image embedded in the email, or do they have to click through to get to it?
Now, I've just started this in December when I had taken a break on Evil Link. So I don't have adequate information on that. I'm assuming they're going to get all of the panels, but that's going to be a situation that if it just shows in the first 2 panels, if they want to read the comic, they're going to have to click through and then go to the app or read it on the desktop version of Substack or do the app. But I don't have complete information on that yet.
Okay, well, let me jump topics to a different thing, because the sort of 800-pound gorilla, or not 800-pound gorilla, the sort of elephant in the room with Substack that I, as a non-Substack user, know from recent news is that a lot of artists are heading out of Substack because, as seems to be the case with every dang social media thing we have lately, some pretty stupid and or horrible people are in charge, and they're not going to in any way do editorial controls for white supremacists and Nazis and white nationalists, if I get that right. First of all, do I have that right?
Yep, absolutely. No, Substack has a Nazi problem was the title of the piece that came out in The Atlantic. And
so first of all, great. What a nice, horrible world we live in. And how fucking A. Also, why is every social media platform run by a horrible human being? Is there not a single nice person in the world? Zuckerberg is allowed Cambridge Analytica onto Facebook. Twitter has its own Nazi and white nationalist problem. Like, why can't we just have one nice person running social media?
And that's my point. You show me a white hat social media platform that's effective, and I'll jump to it. Probably I'm already on half of them, right?
Right.
But I'm still on Twitter, and Elon Musk has brought back a bunch of people that were booted under Jack Dempsey.
All horrible people. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm still on Twitter.
It's always like in Act 2 or something of a Batman movie where someone institutes the breakout of Arkham Asylum, and then suddenly you're dealing with the Scarecrow and you're dealing with the Croc or Killer Croc. That's what Twitter feels like. It's like all the horribles have been released again, and you're like, who broke them all out of Arkham Asylum? What happened? Yeah.
And as long as we're talking about Jack Dempsey, he's the figurehead of Blue Sky. But remember all that horrible stuff that he allowed to happen when he was in charge of Twitter. It's not like it was a golden age, right? So now let's take Blue Sky off the list. Facebook and Instagram, you've already said Cambridge Analytics. You said everything you need to say about that. We can't pretend that didn't happen. So let's take them off the list. Mastodon, listen, I was very clear, or at least I thought I was clear when I talked about Mastodon last time, and that was I have adjusted my opinion on Mastodon to say that instead of thinking that them as a complete zero, I've elevated them to the same level as Blue Sky and Threads. And I said on the show very quickly, so I didn't lose your attention, and that's not a compliment.
I see what you mean. Yeah,
a compliment. So I'm still not bullish on Mastodon. In fact, I still think Mastodon is way in the back, but I'm not quite ready to write it off the way I was a few months ago. But no, and so Mastodon might be the closest to some morally pure social media platform, but it's not going to deliver the way you need it to, right?
No.
Throw in Reddit. Has its problems as well, right? So here's the deal.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, isn't it kind of easy to a little bit get despondent about, like, why can't we just have a nice social media? It's I know I sound like a naive little Pollyanna-ish kid, but it's like, where are the kind people? Why does it always devolve into the worst human beings allowed?
Yeah.
Anyway.
And so like and here's the other thing. You said a bunch of big name creators are leaving Substack, right? People that make a lot of money for Substack. I don't believe that we're going to see as many of those people leaving as they're saying they're going to leave. In other words, there's a lot of saber rattling. There's a lot of people making some very loud proclamations. I'm leaving if this problem isn't fixed. But if they're making significant enough money for Substack to be, at the top of the list, they're making significant money for themselves. And so they have to now balance their own, what's good for themselves, their own self-preservation against making this stand. And by the way, if they do that, I am 100% on their side. You go. I am cheering for you. What I'm saying, though, is when push comes to shove and it means they got to take a pay cut to make this moral stand, they are going to very, very quietly stay on Substack.
Maybe, although some people, and more power to them, have both the financial wherewithal or the moral, whatever you want to call it, backbone to be like, no, this is a worthwhile thing.
They have the courage of their convictions. They've got the courage of their convictions.
Yeah, exactly. That's the right way to say it.
I'm 100% in favor of that. All right.
Yeah.
However, and if that's where you stand, that's good too. I'm for you. My opinion is way more pragmatic, and it goes like this. You show me a morally pure social media platform that delivers good engagement, and I'll post my ass off. Yeah. But meanwhile, I'm not going to leave Substack because I haven't left Twitter, which is, as we just got done talking about, equally evil. Haven't left Facebook, haven't left Instagram, haven't left Reddit. It's silly. It's silly in late stage capitalism to look for a corporate good guy.
Yeah, no, I get it. It just is. It just bums you out, though, doesn't it? Doesn't it? I mean, I know it bums you out because you're a good person, and it's like, God damn it.
Absolutely. But also, I'm a realist. There's Nazis on Substack. Yeah, no shit. There's Nazis on Twitter. There's Nazis on Facebook. There's Nazis on across the street right now. Right. Yeah, this isn't going to go away. And yes, I understand it's better to not platform hate speech, all of that kind of stuff. I'm 100%. I would much rather see Substack do this, enact some kind of moderation. Of course I would. But for me to say, well, I'm just not going to be on Substack, right, I'd have to be consistent and now take myself off of Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all those others. And we haven't even talked about TikTok and the whole raft of potential problems with TikTok.
And state-sponsored problems from that one, too. Exactly. Yeah. Especially as the election ramps up.
Yeah. And so I literally am in a pragmatic space here where I'm much more, listen, this is a problem that goes across all social media platforms, and there are no corporate good guys, and this is where we are.
Yeah. And it's heartbreaking. Gosh darn it. I don't know what the answer to that is. I really don't know how we as individual artists. I don't know how. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is there. It's true. Is the truth. I don't know what the answer is there because I don't know what. To me, it feels like you were saying, Blue Sky potentially has the potential to be one of the better actors, potentially. Mm-hmm. But the problem with Mastodon as a federated system is because it's non-centralized, you could still have bad actors in a non-centralized way that are not sneaking on, but just not centrally screened out. And so because it's federated, they'll find a way onto the Mastodon system. It's just... I hate this aspect of living in a modern life on the internet. It's that you're always one click away from the worst human being you can imagine. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so we're not going to solve that today, although I wanted to talk about it as honestly and openly as we can.
Sure.
But I will say this as I'm wrapping up the Substack portion of this conversation. All that stuff that we hated about Patreon? All those changes Patreon made recently. Right. We did a whole show saying how we hated the free membership tier. And we did a whole show about the good, the bad, and the ugly logo that Patreon did. All of this, almost all the new stuff that Patreon did. Now that I'm on Substack, I see it. It was all, in effect, an attempt to be more like Substack. To bring more Substack. Yeah, they're chasing Substack. They're absolutely all this free membership stuff. Substack. Doing a post over 2 screens, Substack. Giving you a download of something you can use on social media, Substack. It's all Substack. They've gone from being the one that everybody chases to being somebody that's chasing somebody else.
Oh, you're saying that Substack is doing the innovation here in terms
of...
Okay.
Yes.
Well, can I ask you this? Because, again, from a naive standpoint, I haven't used it. How does someone follow you on Substack? Do they pay to follow you, or do they follow you first and then they pay you, or what? How does that work?
It's just as confusing as Patreon. So you gotta give me a little bit of because again, this is all of 2 weeks that I'm talking about here, right? So you can follow somebody, you can become a free subscriber, or you can subscribe.
What?
What? Yep. No, stop and think about it. It's exactly what Patreon just got done doing.
Yeah, it is. That is the same.
It's just the same freaking thing. So if you're a follower, you get certain type of outreach from the person you're following, but not all. If you're a free subscriber, you get I can set up a paywall on a post, right? So I can have the first 3 paragraphs are public, then set up a paywall, and then to read the rest of the post, you've got to be a subscriber. So if you're a free subscriber, you get the free public preview. If you then want to subscribe to read the rest, then you've got to become a paid subscriber.
Okay, but that's kind of set up for journalism type writing, where you got the lead, and right as the lead gets exciting, then you have to pay. How would we make that work in comics? Could you make the first 7 paragraphs free, and then the payoff panel is,
you could. I mean, ostensibly, you could make let's say you've got a 7-panel comic, you could make the first 3 panels public, and then the rest of them are behind the paywall.
Brad, imagine that, Brad. Imagine Charles Schultz it really looks like Charlie Brown's going to kick that football. Oh, here he comes. Oh, all right. If you want to see how it ends up, you got to pay to see.
Well, so you could do what I've seen a lot of people doing with Patreon, where they give you the full comic and then they say there's a bonus panel. And then you could put that behind the paywall.
Sure.
Or you can do what I've suggested from the very beginning. You've got to set up a second exclusive comic or a second exclusive property that you're doing that you've got to be a subscriber to see. Right. Just like a lot of us do on Patreon right now, right? But for comics, strip or comic people like us. Right now, and again, I've been on it for 14,
I'm not holding you to it,
14 days. So right now, it seems to me like a Substack for comics artists is going to be a lot more geared towards that tip jar, where certainly you're going to get it for free, and if you've got a few people to subscribe who want to keep you doing what you're doing, until you get to figure out a way to incorporate exclusives into your Substack, that's probably what you're going to be limited to.
Right. So can you see a world where someone uses entirely free Substack as almost like a mirrored free website? And would that work?
I'll tell you exactly. And I said it earlier. So I'm basically replacing my MailChimp mailing list with a Substack mailing list.
That's true. You did say that at the outfront. Yeah, okay.
MailChimp cost me something like $30 a month. Yeah. Substack cost me $0. And I potentially pick up 1 or 2 kind-hearted people who want to subscribe at the lower level because they like the comics, et cetera, et cetera.
Right,
Basically, I'm replacing a $30 a month MailChimp for a $0 a month Substack. And if we build it into something more than that, fine. But right now, I'm just happy not to be paying $30 a month for MailChimp, especially when I make a post on Substack and the promotional materials, the promotional features that they set you up with to promote that post is jaw-droppingly good. Jaw-droppingly good, including for people who are blogging. An AI, basically you select a bunch of type, it does an AI voiceover, or you can record a voiceover. It puts together this whole little, square movie file that you can post on social media. And then the outreach is amazing, along with static images, all of this stuff. As soon as you get that post, it says, boom, here's your post. Now here's 5 different ways that you can promote it.
Right.
And it's jaw-droppingly good. Good. So so just to wrap up this entire topic, so I don't sit here and filibuster all show. I set up 2 Substacks. The other one is something I've been thinking about doing for a long time because, as I've said on the show, webcomics.com is badly in need of an overhaul. Basically, I set up a second Substack to run the same content, the same type of content, basically mirroring webcomics.com on a Substack, because I can see this having a whole lot more engagement. I can see it picking up a whole. In fact, I've already got 3 subscribers after 14 days, basically doing my webcomics.com thing on Substack, but I can do such better promotion because they line it right up. They're like, here it is. They serve it to you on a silver platter, basically, and there's no way I'm not going to do better with my webcomics.com stuff because it's just sitting right there.
Yeah. Well, listen, I have to tell you, the thing that you've said so far that really has resonated with me is a MailChimp replacement, in the sense that I actually just looked it up while you were talking, and I'm currently paying $54 a month on MailChimp. Yep. And so that's roughly, I don't know what, $650, $700 a year? No, $650. Yep. And so, but the problem is I own that list. Like, that's mine. And so I own and control that audience in a world where a lot of social medias I don't. Because I'm not 100% convinced, if one were to set up on Substack, do you have portability for that list if somewhere down the road you want to move them somewhere else? Or
I have no idea.
Fair enough.
14 days. 14 days.
2 weeks.
14 days. No, that is a good question. It's something we should follow up on. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. Because I do see the value of saving that $54 a month.
Yeah.
I'm just afraid that it's sort of a slow enshittification process where for the first couple of years, everything on Substack would be great. And then they would slowly clamp down and be like, no, you can't. Remember when Google did that with where you couldn't move what was it? Was it Google? Anyway, we've all had it where you can't port your data out, and they make it really hard to port your data out.
Yeah.
And so I'm imagining a world like where 4 or 5 years from now, I'm like, I don't want to do Substack anymore, but I can't move my list,
Yeah.
But the short form of this is that you and I and everyone are experiencing the fact that we're having increasing troubles with social media, trying to find, build, communicate with, and direct our audiences via social media. And so this is one of your solutions, or not one of your solutions, one of your experimentations to see if there's new ways to reach people. That I respect. I don't know that I'm willing to do it yet, but I'm willing to follow very closely along with what you're doing to see how it works. And I don't say that in any malevolent way. It's more laziness in the sense that I've got other things I'm working on that I'm not ready to do, try something right now, and I am interested to see how this will net out with their current leadership, whether they'll get moved out or whether their editorial processes will change. But it's funny. We've seen this in the last, year where Gumroad, everyone fled Gumroad for that. We saw it with when Musk took over Twitter, everyone fled Twitter. But I go back to this. I don't know where society writ large is going to land. And I really do feel like fragmentation is going to continue through 2024, probably into 2025, because I don't know what the new landing point is for everyone collectively. Yeah.
Well, and let's say I'm wrong about everything that I said about Substack in terms of the big people who are making noise right now, who are saying, they're going to leave Substack. If they're going to leave Substack, they're probably going to go to one of Substack's competitors, to do the same thing that they had been doing.
Right. Which is probably a Patreon, right? If you're trying to make money on.
You know what? That's a really good question. I would imagine it might be Patreon, or it might be somebody else who's specifically doing a newsletter type of thing. Right.
Right.
And if that happens, fantastic. I'll take and port my stuff over there if they have the same kind of features and engagement that I'm seeing right now in the early days of starting this up. If Substack has a competitor that's going to do a better job of moderation, and if they've got the features and the engagement, then you'd be dumb not to make that shift too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. All right, well, continuing your 2024 outreach plans, what's next on the list? What else do you got?
Well, I've got a bunch of things on the list, but I'm just going to, so I don't end up filibustering the whole show, I'll give you some highlights. Highlights.
Yep.
One of the things that I did, and I had been going back and forth on this decision for the last year. I split my I split my main Twitter account and my After Dark promotion on Twitter. Basically, I took all my After Dark promotion, and I'm going to start a new Twitter account for just that. And I'm going to dial back a little bit. I'm going to still be talking about Patreon a fair bit, but I'm going to be focusing my main Twitter account on the other things that I'm doing, and split that off just because it's always been in the back of my mind. It's really weird that here I am talking about webcomics and, hey, be out there, be your best person and everything. And then every fifth post is bow, chicka, wow, wow. It was always a little bit of a tone change,
And now for a Friday evening tone switch.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I tell you, I think as a friend looking on, I think that's a smart move. That always was a weird, and it's tricky to know when and how to make that choice, but I think that's the right one. My first and immediate question with this is, if you've split the Twitter in twain, does that mean you now logically have to split your Mastodon, your Blue Sky, your Threads, your Instagram? Wouldn't that stand to reason that you should have two splits?
It does stand to reason. I don't see myself doing it, but it stands. So I do very little After Dark promotion on Facebook and Instagram. Very, very little.
Oh, is that because they're not cool with that?
No. Well, partially because they do tamp down so much, and also partially that's just how it developed. And
yeah, I gotcha.
It was an organic outcropping of what was going on there. So Facebook and Instagram, I never did a whole lot of After Dark promotion.
Right.
Threads, Mastodon, and Blue Sky do not deliver a high enough engagement for me to spend more than 5 seconds at a time on them.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So the answer is maybe it's
for me too. It's still about a couple hundred people tops following me, and it's like, what are we doing here?
And if one of them starts to deliver engagement, I'll start thinking about it more. But right now,
that's fair. That's a fair response.
So the answer is, I'm not going to change any of the others anymore. I'm going to stay the course on the rest of them.
And listen, maybe this is a topic we should spin out to a whole subject on a future show. But Brad's problem or situation, I guess is a better way to say it. Brad's situation of having somewhat disparate audiences and disparate marketing is true for any of us that work long enough, in the sense that Brad if you think about it, someone who has followed me for Sheldon for decades, it's weird for them to be like, hey, and here's this sci-fi thing you don't care about with Drive, you know, like, right. I encourage you to come read this thing. And they're like, I don't care. I don't want this. Why is it all blue? I don't want any of this. This is weird. You know what I mean? Like, so I can see there's a version of your truth carries over for a lot of different artists in that they sometimes have very disparate audiences. And how do you manage communicating to those disparate ones while still wanting to entice each one to try out the other one, you know?
Yeah. And partially, I mean, I'm really of two minds on this. I think mine is so drastic that I really don't have second thoughts about it having pulled the trigger on it. But like for yours, the other way you've got to balance that is that it's a social media post. It's in front of somebody it's 2 live. Seconds, for 7 seconds, I think, is the average that a post is relevant, unless it takes off and starts to go somewhat viral, right? Right. 7 seconds lifetime. So, you know, your Sheldon readers who don't like Drive, the chances of that impacting their day is so small. You know. Now, meanwhile, mine is the difference between, for example, promoting educational stuff like webcomics.com or the Webcomics Handbook
with a
on
different
Substack.
kind of educational stuff.
And without a doubt, there's some. I go from adult education to adult education, like Daryl Hall and John Oates told us back in the 80s. But yeah, so that's one thing that I did was starting to split, and oh my God, it's starting a Twitter from zero. It's been, I keep getting these notes from Twitter saying, you've got to engage more so we don't know you're a bot. And so now I'm like, great, I've got to engage more on a whole feed of After Dark stuff. Well, what do you say? You know, boy, you draw curved lines really well. You know, I'm trying to find things that are natural to say without being a creep. I'm telling you, this NSFW stuff is harder than it looks.
Well, yeah, I imagine. And I wonder, is that new to Twitter? Like, hey, you've got to engage or else we think you're a bot. Is that newish? I don't remember that happening when we started.
This is the first time I started from zero on Twitter since 2010 or something. I mean, I don't know.
God, it's all just a dystopian hellscape, though, in terms of social media. That like you probably are, likelihood statistically, you probably are a bot. You know, in terms of starting a new thing that's NSFW. Of course, Twitter's going to do that.
Absolutely.
Anyway, okay. So what's next on your agenda now that we're powering through the list?
So now also more process videos because
really?
Yeah. So since I work in Clip Studio, I can just set it and forget it as a default. It records a time lapse of my drawing process in Clip Studio on every single thing that I work on. So I've got a ton of stuff because I think I turned this on a year and a half ago. I've got a ton of stuff that I can show the drawing process on. And then what I've been doing is I'll take a little clip from Comic Lab, and I credit the podcast and say this is from episode 312 when we talked about this or that. I take a little clip, so I've got audio from Comic Lab of you and me talking about stuff. Put it against the process video, and it's a nice little package.
How long does that take you to put together?
Surprisingly little time, because I've kind of got it. Once you do it a few times, you get into a rhythm. You know?
But when you say surprisingly little, maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes,
20 minutes. 20 minutes.
All right, well, that's not bad. That's not bad. Okay.
But see, the other thing that I'm doing, again, with the theme being outreach in 2024, is that allows me to get a lot better outreach on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram Reels, because I can now take and also I'm using that for my Evil Ink Substack, and depending on what we're talking about, I can use that as a free post for the Webcomics Handbook Substack to get people into what I'm doing there, right? So it's just like the whole idea of the Patreon free membership tour. I'm doing a certain amount of either Substack that I'm talking about certain amount of stuff that has no paywall at all. It's just free to read entirely.
Right.
Of course, with the first one's free idea that your local drug dealer uses as well to get those people enticed. And then once they're a free subscriber, then you walk them up the ladder to becoming a paid subscriber. So those videos, I can do that once, and with a little adjustment, I've got YouTube, TikTok, Instagram Reels, and Substack. I get a bang for my buck on all of that. Again, by the way, by March, I probably will have changed all of this, because some of these things that I'm talking about are going to work. Some of these things are going to fall flat on their face. Right. This is all in the idea of the first couple of months of 2024, doing a bunch of stuff, seeing what's taking, what's not, with the idea that by the time I launch that Kickstarter, I've got some ideas of what I'm going to do to replace my tried and true methods that clearly are not going to work anymore. Right.
Well, I got to say, as a friend, of all the ones you've mentioned so far, this one feels like I feel like the ROI on this will be the least impactful, in the sense that I don't know that it's worth your time to make process videos for platforms that don't necessarily allow linking out, like TikTok or YouTube. Or for whom someone might come to love your process videos, but don't end up liking the comics themselves. And so I'm curious to see, and I'm excited that you're experimenting. But from 30,000 feet, I kind of sense that this one might be one in March that goes by the wayside. You know,
you very well could be true. Along with the other thing that I'm doing on TikTok, and this was a suggestion of Chris Hallback several months ago. But TikTok allows you to put static images up in a slideshow.
Sure.
Well, I've already chopped up all of my comics for my vertical scroll. It takes me about 5 to 10 minutes. In fact, I did it this morning while I was waiting for my sausage and eggs to cook in the kitchen. To take all of those for one page worth of evil ink, put it up on Twitter, on TikTok rather, as a slideshow. And I'm getting surprisingly good views from that in the early days. I'm up to page 4 right now. So far, again, I have no illusions about where this is going. I'm literally just doing it to see, does this work? Does that work? And by March, all this stuff is going to be different. Now, the rest of what I'll do just before I bring this topic to a close, everything else, you hear a lot of social media there, and you heard me say on the earlier show, a lot of the stuff that is working is non-social media means. So the rest of my list falls very much into non-social media means. For example, I've already started to outreach to a bunch of other podcasts to do some appearances there.
Now that feels like good ROI to me.
Yes. And again, once I do that, then you're always kind of chopping up this stuff and reusing it. Once you've got content,
it also lives in their archives. It only takes you 20 to 40 minutes to do the whole thing in terms of, exactly.
And I know how to be good behind a microphone.
You do, yeah.
I can guarantee, in fact, it's in my outreach email when I'm offering myself as a guest, you're not going to have to pull teeth in this interview. Just listen to any episode of Comic Lab. I'll talk your ear off. I'll make a good show. We'll have a good time. I can make things happen verbally that'll make this a good show. It's not going to be like these interviews where you're talking to people and trying to pull teeth to get them to say something interesting. I'm good at that. So that's something I'm going to be doing more of. And also, again, what one main thing, and I can't talk about this too much, but I'll put a headline on it. One of the big notes in my book is in 2024, I'm going to pretend like it's 2004 all over again. So I'm going to start doing a lot of the stuff that we did in 2004. I've shared a couple. In fact, one of them might be Comic Lab related as well. But we're going to talk. I'm going to go back to the old playbook. and do a lot of stuff like it's 2004 and see what I can get generated up. Couple of which you and I talked about on the phone yesterday, and I think you'll agree it's got some potential.
I want to say, and I know it's always annoying to hear someone talking about something and not actually say what it is. We just can't do it yet. But if it's the one I'm thinking of, Brad has a very smart idea whose time may have come back around again in terms of what's old is new again. And I think if we can figure out a way to implement it, I think it actually could be to a lot of people's benefit in terms of avoiding social media, but sharing comics with other comics loving folks. So more to come on that in the next, I would say 6 months or so, maybe 12 months, as and when Brad is able to figure it out with a little help from his old pal, Dave Kellett.
Yeah. And then the rest is cross promotion, old fashioned cross promotion, reaching out to different people who are doing comics similar to mine and doing the Patreon content exchange or finding some way to cross promote between our two different brands. And I'm telling you, this is the year of going back to the old playbook. All the stuff, Dave, that you and I did, made it up as we went along in 2004, cross promotion, different ways because we didn't have social media then. If we found somebody who was a reader, we shared them, right? It's like, hey, I found this person. They're they might like your stuff too. All that cross promotion, all of that, do it yourself, put it together and see if it works. It's all stuff that is top of my list for 2024.
Well, that was a great summarizing list. And I honestly, because we're all suffering from this, I wish you all the best with this experimentation for 2024. And I will say, because I think Brad would underline this too, that underpinning all of this is our advice that before you do anything or worry about anything in terms of promotion or social media, the crux of it all is to have a good comic that you are proud of, that you're enjoying, that other people will enjoy. And I will say, because I'm largely dropping the ball with Drive when it comes to social media lately. I've just been busy and I haven't been doing it well. And in general, social media is broken. But one of the reasons why Drive continues to grow is it's a damn good story. And that's the underpinning thing that we always have to remember with our comics. You make your comics as good as they can be, people will find a way to them in the weirdness that is the internet. People are still sharing, whether it's sending them by text or sending them by emails to friends or this or that. It's still getting out there, even if social media is breaking. If you have the underpinning of having a good comic, it finds a way to new eyeballs over time.
Yep. And that's such a great way to wrap that topic up. With everything that's going on, we can't lose track of the reason we're doing this. We can't get into doing process videos and Substack newsletters and all this other stuff, podcast appearances, if it means taking the time away that we need to do that comic and to do it right.
Right. Well, Brad, one update that I wanted to jump in onto the show as we're now in the new year for 2024. For American audiences, you know that every January 1st is sort of the public domain day. There's a phrase for it that I forget what it is, but it's basically when things in copyright come into public domain and are free to be used and employed and reinterpreted in the artistic sphere. So we're entering into the jazz age, largely coming into public domain. And I'm very excited about that because in about 5 to 10 years from now, we start having really good jazz recordings. We kind of have sort of good jazz recordings right now, but in about 5 to 10 years, we have really good jazz recordings coming into public domain. And in about 5 to 10 years, we have really good comics coming into public domain. For the most part, and I jokingly mentioned this on Twitter, you get comics like Flapper Fanny Says, which was a huge hit from 1924. Oh boy, we're all excited to reinterpret Flapper Fanny Says. But Brad, a huge one came into public domain this January 1st.
Yeah, and we've been getting lots of email about it from our Patreon backers. Steamboat Willie is not Mickey Mouse.
Not Mickey
Steamboat
Mouse.
Willie.
Yeah, can't emphasize that enough. Not Mickey Mouse.
Oh my God. But one thing, I'll finish my sentence. Steamboat Willie comes into public domain. Please, if you're out there thinking about this, I've seen so much misinformation, disinformation and downright shitty information from people trying to clear this all up. I'm going to tell you the right way. I'm going to tell you what's right and what's wrong about Steamboat Willie. Be very careful where you're getting your information from. There's a lot of people who are, I'll read it through, and just the basics that I know about some of this stuff, just on a fair use basis, and how trademark law comes into this. It's like, oh, that can't be right. and I'll read one thread that tries to clear this all up, and then I'll read another thread. That person's just as confident as the first person and has completely different information in it. So yeah. I'm telling you, be very careful. But the question we've got, Dave, I'm gonna send it right over to you.
Okay.
Do we have plans on doing a Steamboat Willie comic? Would we ever do a Steamboat Willie comic? Or would we ever take any other public domain character and use it in our own work?
So this is a great question, and it's an exciting question, because remember, let's get to the fundamentals of this. When copyright was first started in the US and first in the UK, when it was first started, you sort of had a time-limited term, usually within the artist's own life. So I think some of the early ones were copyright terms of like 30 years. But the idea was society granted you exclusivity of your ideas so that you could financially and creatively benefit. But ultimately, you were going to turn it over to society so that it in turn could be reinterpreted, reincorporated, re-enriched. And in so doing, all the boats got lifted by that tide, right? It's the same kind of idea with patents, same kind, not less so much with trademarks, but you get the idea, which is society grants you exclusivity for a while so that you can be personally enriched as an artist and a creator, but then ultimately gets turned over. So on a philosophical level, I love the idea of public domain, and I love the idea that I at least have the opportunity to consider, hey, I might like to do a Sherlock Holmes comic strip someday. That would be fun, and now I can. Or, you know what? I would love to do a Winnie the Pooh, and now Tigger's in the public domain too. Great. I'm going to do a Dave Kellett version of Winnie the Pooh and Tigger. I'm not going to do it right now. I have enough of my own ideas, but I love the idea that it's possible to us,
That's okay. That's a very good answer to that question. You like the idea. You like it in concept, maybe not so much in practice, but you like the fact that you could.
Well, I maybe not so much in practice, because the stuff for me personally that's coming into public domain, like I said, I don't really have a desire to do a Flapper comic strip from 1924 reinterpreted. Like, what am I going to do with that? I could do something with Winnie the Pooh and Tigger. I could actually see a Dave Kellett version of that being kind of fun. I could do a Sherlock Holmes reinterpretation. I could see a Dave Kellett version of that being kind of fun, like a comic strip of, a kind of cocaine-addled Sherlock Holmes. That'd be fun. But it just occurred to me, is Watson in the public domain yet? I know Sherlock Holmes in the U.S. is, but I don't know if Watson is yet.
I just assumed the whole property was in public domain.
Well, no, because you know how Tigger only this year came into public domain, even though Winnie the Pooh had come into public domain a couple years ago.
Right.
Because it all depends on publication date within the U.S., and even separate from when it was published in the UK. Anyway, every year, I look at what's coming into the public domain, because I kind of hope, Brad, that something sparks with me. Because one of the things that I would love to do, and I think you'll appreciate this, is I would love to not redraw anything, but to digitally strip out the text of a comic strip and kind of in a Dave Malky kind of a way, insert new text that's sort of insert kind of new text that recontextualizes and makes it all kind of meta-texty. I think that would be a fun sort of experiment just to try. I don't want to devote my creative life to it, but I think that would be fun to try. How about you? Let me turn the question over to you.
That's the thing. I mean, the biggest nightmare is if you did that and it got popular. And now you got to keep doing that. Right?
Yeah.
So I thought long and hard, because we got so many questions about this on Comic Lab that I knew we were going to be talking about it. And I think the best, I tried to find the right combination of words to say this as coherently as I can. But I have no plans on doing a Steamboat Willie comic, because that's not how I think of creativity. That's not what creativity means to me. Okay.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that if you did a Steamboat Willie comic that you're not creative. It just means that you interpret your creativity, your personal creativity, in a different way. But for me, my creativity is I've got a certain amount of things that I put into the world. Captain Heroic, Mismatch, Lightning Lady. I have, and they're mine, all mine. And whether they're terrific or whether they're horrible, they're mine. Okay.
Yeah.
I would hate to do a Steamboat Willie comic that got popular for two reasons. Number one, I would hate that it got popular more than Evil Inc. It would be to my eternal shame that this is the thing that's popular. Steamboat Willie. My Steamboat Willie is somehow, for me, I would feel like a creative failure. Doesn't mean that you should, doesn't mean that you are. Anybody listening to this who's got Steamboat Willie on their drawing desk, this is not what this is about at all. It's about what's happening between my ears. I wouldn't want to take the risk of my Steamboat Willie comic getting popular. And also because number two, Steamboat Willie is so close to Mickey Mouse, who is covered by tons and tons of not only copyright and trademark, but tons and tons and legions of Disney lawyers. I don't want to take the risk of doing a Steamboat Willie comic that gets popular because my own gut feeling is that Disney is just waiting for somebody.
I agree with you. They are waiting to make an example of someone.
Out of.
Yeah.
And so all these people who are right now on Twitter saying, look at my Steamboat Willie. And it's all Mickey Mouse. It's not Steamboat Willie. It's all Mickey Mouse. And they're putting them in all kinds of horrible situations, bloody, gory, this and that and the other that you'd never find Mickey Mouse in because isn't that great? I wouldn't want to ever take the risk of coming up above the radar on that because my sense is they are waiting somebody to absolutely clobber, just to cream that person so that nobody else tries it again. I don't have any reason to think that. It might be my tinfoil hat, but I would hate to take the risk of getting popular on something that Disney wants to make an example out of.
I will say the one thing, and it won't happen until I'm a very old cartoonist, the one thing that I will be excited for it to come into public domain will be, first it'll be The Hobbit, and then it'll be The Lord of the Rings. I'm not kidding, Brad, when I say, if you gave me carte blanche right now to tell The Lord of the Rings in long form comic pages in the exact same way that I'm doing Drive, and allow me to insert Dave Kellett humor into the process, I would 100% do that story. 100% do that story. I am not kidding, and I would have so much fun with it. I don't like another favorite of mine, Dune. I might do it, but really, Lord of the Rings, Jesus. I would do it in a heartbeat. You're looking. I want everyone to know Brad is shaking his head.
Yeah. But what's stopping you from doing that today?
It's nothing. Here's the thing. Drive is my reaction to wanting to tell Star Trek and Star Wars, but I was like, fuck it, I'm making my own. I'm going to build my own world. And that's what I did.
And it's yours.
Yes, it's mine. It's mine completely. And as Bill Ayman once said in Stripped, the film that I did, how lovely it is to say you were a part of something, but how much better it is to say I did all of this,
Right.
And that's what point. Drive is for me. That's what Evil Inc. for you is. Yeah. But I'm just saying there's something lovely about the ability and the right of artists to be able to reinterpret other art if they're so doing. And say, I would love to retell Lord of the Rings now that it's in the public domain in a comic way, in a comedic way. I think that would be fun for me. And I won't let you poo-poo the idea because I think that will be fun. But I'll be 90 when that happens. So who cares?
Yeah. But I guess that's my point. It's like you said, you'd love to do Sherlock Holmes. You could do Sherlock Holmes right now. But you just don't call him Sherlock Holmes. But you can reinterpret all of that. I mean, really, my son just discovered the TV series House MD. You remember that one with what's his face?
Sure. What's his name? House is Sherlock Holmes.
Fry something in the fry. Anyway, Anyway, it's House. And my wife says, "Oh, what's House?" And I said, "Oh, House is what if Sherlock Holmes were a doctor?" And he's got all this great deductive reasoning, but he's even more horribly twisted than Sherlock Holmes was with his heroin addiction. House is basically what if Sherlock Holmes was a doctor. He's got a Watson who stands by him. He solves mysteries. It's just what if Sherlock Holmes was a doctor, right?
Yeah. And in the same way that like Monk is Sherlock Holmes if Sherlock Holmes had a bunch of weird tics and stuff, and Columbo is Sherlock Holmes if he mumbled, that kind of thing. So I take your point.
Don't you pick on my Peter Falk. He's a national treasure.
But I take your point though that do it on your own anyway and reinterpret in the same way that there's 10,000 stories of the hero's journey. I see what you're saying. Yeah. But there's something specifically fun about Dave Kellett's version of Sherlock Holmes, and now I can do it. And wouldn't that be fun to do,
Yeah. Well, that's the only thing that I can think of is I shudder to think that in 100 years, when Comic Lab goes into the public domain, there's going to be two different people sitting behind what suits for a microphone in those days who are going to be saying something like, "You've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics."
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of the new comic strip Flapper Fanny Says from 1924, and also the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com. I'm not kidding. That's a real title of a comic strip that came into public domain. Flapper Fanny Says, and I'm not kidding. That's a real title.
And my friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped, the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and the delightful director of Drive at drivecomic.com.
And we didn't talk about it, but I think parts of Gasoline Alley and parts of the comic Tarzan also came into public domain this year, but also two things that no one cares about for the most part. The Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net, and this episode was edited by the ever wonderful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And don't forget to give us a 5-star review over on Spotify, where we are burning up the podcast charts. And I will say Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/Comic Lab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice, patreon.com/Flapper Fanny Says. Okay, Brad, of the comic strips that are coming into public domain in the next couple of years, we're starting to get into like Buster Brown, that kind of era of comic strips. There's nothing that intrigues you. There's not a single one that you'd be like, I'd like to do a 20 comic strip run, not like years of your work, but like nothing that would intrigue you.
I gotta say, honest to goodness, and I'm not putting on a show. That's just not how I define creativity for me.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the year 2060. It's 90 years after Garfield first was created. You wouldn't want to do a Garfield?
No. Garfield is not my. I enjoyed reading it, but I would not want to write it.
Okay, so I will tell you that a couple years back, the Schultz studio asked me to do a Peanuts for one of their books. I enjoyed it just as a fun one-off. But then I was like, I wouldn't want to draw Peanuts. This is not mine. No. I'm not responsible for this. This is not my mood, my world, my characters. So I kind of agree with you that I wouldn't want to take over someone else's thing.
But at the same time, I don't want to yuck somebody else's yum. In other words, I can understand there's a whole tradition of people taking over like syndicated newspaper comics and pouring their own soul into it and doing some really beautiful things
and making it better sometimes.
Yeah. And I'm absolutely a big fan of that. I think if that's your thing, you should do it. It's just not, it wouldn't be fulfilling for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, on that front, look forward to Brad and Dave's upcoming hit, Little Orphan Annie, coming up in 2040. We're going to be excited to offer that to you. Little Orphan Annie.
Remember to eat your Ovaltine.